Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Token Podcast. I'm your host and sometimes referee, the friendly neighborhood Zach Sad Pearson. And today, I'm joined by the one who guards the Highlands, despite their stature, a 1B.
What's up?
And since this is an interview episode, the guest of the hour, or possibly 40 minutes, these usually go 40 minutes instead of a full hour. A one author of Locked Out of Heaven, no, not the Bruno Mars song. A one Danielle M Orisino.
How are you? I have beaten Bruno Mars, though, I want to say, in the search once. I only did it once, but I have beaten him. So I just have to get that out there because it only happened once and I was very proud when it did.
It's right there. That is,
Okay, thank you.
I salute you.
Thank you. Bruno and I are going to have it out one day.
Okay, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a fantasy author of the Birth of the Fae series. It contains 6 books, 2 novellas that I am re-releasing as the director's cut. And I am a martial artist and cosplayer.
Oh, cosplayer.
Yes. Yes, I am.
Hoo-hoo.
I've done my own characters, but I always usually resort to my DC love. I have done one Marvel, I've done Firestar.
Okay.
Firestar does not get enough respect.
No, she doesn't. I agree.
For Allison Court to play Firestar in X-Men 97 for like almost 2 years now.
It's a good one. I agree. When I did it for Chris Claremont, he was very happy to see a Firestar.
Yeah, slightly off topic, but for those of you who don't know why Firestar has any fan base, not too long after her debut, she ended up in a 70s, or I believe very, very early 80s American cartoon called Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, featuring her, Iceman, and Spider-Man as college roommates.
Yes.
And she's pretty much had no representation since then, which still makes me sad.
Yes, it does.
I genuinely feel like Allison Court is a good fit for that character. But moving on.
I like it.
Yeah, I think I told her about it once. So with that being said, you got a pretty extensive book collection, and I dare say that ain't too many people who specifically in your little niche of medieval fantasy, which is a hard thing to say because if there was ever one genre of novelizations that's overpopulated, it's medieval. So what is your book series primarily about?
I don't know if you categorize me as medieval because I do go from the beginning of time through the plagues of London. That's okay. Um, it's the origin of the Fae, but in my world, Fae is actually an acronym to cover all the mythical creatures that we know about, like mermaids, dryads, pixies, nymphs. It's all of them and how they came to be. Because from reading these books, these creatures were always just there. There was no real explanation. So I actually go through their origins, but I take it away from Celtic religion and mythology. I actually bring it into a little bit of Christianity, paganism, all of that kind of stuff. But I got in a little trouble for it here and there as well, because I do take it from angels, maybe that can't go home, and become the center of our polytheistic gods and goddesses throughout history. And some people appreciate that, and let's just say others don't.
Zealots. You can call them what they fucking are. Oh, by the way, this isn't a PG-13 channel. Don't get me wrong. We don't get a lot of excessive, nudity, swearing, or
Mhm.
anything, but no one's gonna fault you if you swear.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that makes me now I'm not on watch so much, but because the books I've ended up on a couple blasphemy lists.
Oh,
Those lists, they're adorable.
Yes, I've ended up on a couple. I've made some enemies,
honestly, that's
but
the goal.
I kind of feel like I've made it.
Yeah.
There's been some people that feel the Vatican should get involved and ban the book. The Vatican's too busy. And if they weren't, I'd be worried. So, yeah.
Who accidentally made it on the Vatican shit list once upon a time. Yeah, it's not really a worthwhile shit list. It's actually very anticlimactic.
Uh,
The Vatican's reach, well, don't get me wrong, there'll always be a zealot who can get in charge of a nation, but the Vatican's reach as far as things that happen on the internet or in books is practically non-existent. It amounts to you being put on a religious shit list. That means that your content,
I'm already there.
your novel is not going to be able to be brought into the Vatican. That's literally as far as it goes. They got mad at
Oh,
me for reviewing something that had someone fighting dressed up in whole Catholic based themed religious garb. And I was like, wow, that was stupid. And like, I actually got the actual message too.
was it like, did it come in like a parchment with a seal?
No,
You
no, it was
break
all
it
over the internet
open.
and it was the most mundane thing I've ever seen.
Oh, I was so hoping it'd be a big deal.
I
Okay.
know. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't get me wrong. Technically, on paper, I'm an atheist, but it's really more of a I will believe in a God when I see a God situation. I don't rule out that they can exist. I just don't think that most people who claim they know God have ever actually met or seen him. And so far, I've been right. But
Agreed.
when I got that internet message, I was like, I had to verify that was real. I had to actually ask YouTube, is this real or is it some spam? So I was like, no, that's actually real. The Vatican will not play this
Yeah.
video in any part in their nation city. I was like, wow,
Wow.
that was lame.
Yeah, I thought it'd be something big.
I know.
I was like hoping for, like a big parchment that I could frame or something. No, oh, geez. That just wind out of my sails right there. Darn. Okay. I'll do something bigger next time then. Well, then again, a lot of people haven't gotten to book 4. They're still on book 1, and I'm on list for that. They're so hooked up on that that by the time they get to 4, maybe I can do it. I'm hope, one can dream.
I know it sounds a little bit.
I believe in you. You can do it.
I know it's one of those moments. I'm gonna try. The book's already written, so it's not like I go out and do it. It's just already there. But everybody was just so upset about the first one that I'm like, you guys really have to expand your horizons. I do a lot more damage in 4. You poked the bear. 4 is done. It's been out, but they're still upset about 1. Apparently, you can't mix religion and fantasy. People get upset about that when you take biblical scenes and turn it into fey battles. I don't know. They have an issue with that. Who knew?
What you're saying is they haven't heard of Neil Gaiman.
For some reason, he's okay, but I no, I'm not. I'm not. I don't know if it's a woman thing either. Not
Probably.
sure about that. But yeah, I've literally had death threats. I've had people take pictures of guns and put a date underneath it and send it to me. It's gotten that out of control. I've had people outside my home follow me. It was at one point so bad that I didn't know what to do because I would get very upset about it. I tried to defend myself. That never went well. That never goes well when you try to answer. So it then became a joke. And I've given the same answer. And when they write me and tell me things, I always say the same thing. I don't know what realm of hell Lucifer and I will be living in once we're married, but we're registered at Bed Bath and Beyond. Please send towels. And that's the answer I give them whenever they're like, can we send you information on how you can be closer to God and whatever? I'm like, as soon as I have my mailing address in hell, I will totally let you know. But for now, we're registered at Bed Bath and Beyond. And that's what I tell people because I can't defend myself anymore.
Delightful.
It's, I'm like, I'm over it.
Hmm.
So I've just walked away. But I keep saying, you guys are only on book 1. It gets worse. Keep going. Uh, and no one has put together the titles yet. And I'm going to give it away now. Maybe somebody will. But after you get through Kingdom Come, it's the end of the Our Father. Kingdom Come, a Fey is done. Forgive us. Nobody's figured out that I'm using the end of the Our Father. I'm like, do you guys put it? And then I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. So each thine eyes of mercy is a prayer. It was Queen Mary's favorite prayer. I'm like, have you figured? And I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm like, when you get there, you let me know. I'm sure we'll have a whole new flight to go. I didn't start out that way. It just, the more threats I got, the more I was like, oh. And at that point, the books had been written. Then I went back. They weren't published yet, and I was like, "Well, now we're gonna change a couple things." Like, the Jesus factor was already in there. That actually is the name of a chapter in Kingdom Come. I may have just spruced it up a little bit, but
Mhm.
things were already there, and I was searching for the titles for book, 5 and 6. Kingdom Come was already named, and that's when I was like, "Oh, look at this." So, you know, you poke me and you poke me enough, and then I tend to bite. It takes a lot, but once I get there, then the wheels start turning,
Right.
and they did.
It's fun.
You are going to be a very popular writer. Call it a prediction. I'm reminded of a famous poet who took the anger that people gave him unnecessarily and used it against them. He's a very famous poet and a religious figure. It's Our Father, who art in Michigan, shady be thy name. So you're among good company.
You know what? I think I will be appreciated. I joke that my work is a lot like Birds of Prey, The Emancipation of Harley Quinn. It may not have been financially successful in the beginning, but critically, everybody was like, that was a really good movie. I'm kind of like that. I was like, in the beginning, you're like, you might not get to it. And then you're like, but you know what? It's appreciated. I kind of feel like that. I will be appreciated. And then they'll go back and then I'll reap the rewards later. So we'll see. But I just kind of laugh about it. At the end of the day, I'm like, it's a fantasy book, guys. We're taking this whole thing way too seriously. And I just rock with it.
This is America.
Uh,
Um, Feel free to take a look at the chat on the side. There's a message there for you. But that being said, that is the definition of fucking hilarious. Man, don't get me wrong. I am firmly supplanted in a blue state. I believe the people who want us to be civil with one another like to call people like me libtards, which is a contraction for liberal retards, but they want to be treated respectfully, which the irony of it.
right.
Yeah, I know. I'm technically not a Democrat, but all things considered, I'd rather not be on the religious zealot side in any time or place because, well, if they're doing that to a fantasy author who essentially couldn't harm more than a wet paper bag or a fly, imagine what
We don't know that.
imagine what they would do to me if I told them the truth. So, you have both my respect and condolences in that regard because ignorant people don't like learning. Otherwise, they wouldn't be ignorant. Um, with that being said, uh, since we already kind of mentioned it, any upcoming works you want to promote?
Right now, I'm re-releasing all the books, and I'm doing the director's cut. So I'm kind of having fun because I have left my two former publishers. I've had two publishers in my day. I have left both of them, and now I'm on my own, and I'm finally releasing the books the way I felt they should be released. So I'm re-releasing them. All the audiobooks are done. Those are also the director's cut. I did those first because I have myasthenia gravis, and that prevents me from reading a lot of the times because in myasthenia gravis, it affects your eyes. So I released those kind of, as a little nod to other patients with myasthenia gravis. But now I'm releasing the Kindle, the paperback, that kind of thing. And I'm re releasing all the books with the chapters that they said I couldn't put in or nobody would care about. And I break the fourth wall in all of the books with a message from the narrator, which once again, I was told I can't do. And the minute you tell me I can't do it, I want to do it. So I finally got to do that. So I'm really excited. And each book is coming out. From the Ashes comes out December 17th. I'm trying to get it out earlier. So I'm doing all of that right now. And then I have my own radio show called Once Upon an Author, which is the stories behind the author. And I'm giving everybody the tea on what went into making the books, everything that went wrong. And there's a lot that went wrong. But then I'm also sharing the little victories as I relaunch the books. Because when I was first writing, I watched a lot of those A&E like biography specials on authors, and they were always this view from the top, you know, this J.K. Rowling or George R. R. Martin, who all are like, I knew I was going to make it. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice when you're sitting on $70 million.
Mhm.
Yeah. Plus,
But what happened?
she was damn near homeless for
A,
like most of her life.
but she also studied the classics in university. And when you can go to university for free, which you
Yeah.
can in England, but you're
Mhm.
leaving out you studied the Greek classics. You always wanted to be a writer, which is great. You took a lot of writing classes, whatever. You also gave out 1,500 free copies of Harry Potter to libraries.
Yeah.
There are certain things that like get left out, you know? Same thing with George R. R. Martin. You wrote for X Files. I'm not taking that away from you, but you had certain connections. It's not like people didn't know who you were. Nobody's ever seen anybody at the bottom climbing the mountain and backsliding. I kind of want to talk about that stuff. And, people, everybody thinks like I've talked to other authors and like, I have a degree in creative writing. And I'm like, okay. And I just stare at them. I'm like, that's awesome. And they're like, did you do a lot of research? When you did this, did you analyze this poem? And I'm like, I picked up a journal and I started writing because I didn't know. And are you a plotter or a pantser? And I'm like, is that a sexual thing? What? And I just laughed because I'm like,
Heard that's what I thought at first when I first heard that too. You're not alone.
thank you. Thank you. It's stuff like that. So I'm just kind of laying it all out there on Once Upon an Author and telling people whether you have training or not, if you want to do it, just go do it. I'm not saying you'll be successful. That's not what I'm saying. Because, like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes and I still am. But there's just a matter of living outside the box. And that's what I try to convey. And I try to show them, even with my books, that they're all being re released because I listened to the group, when I released them, especially like Locked Out of Heaven. Oh, nobody wants to hear a prologue. People don't read the prologue, don't do it. And then when I got the second chance, I did the prologue. But then it was like, no, nobody needs a chapter about this character. And I just kept listening because I'm like, they know better. And now I get to release them my way. And I appreciate that.
I am happy for you. Um. Okay. Uh. Well, this one was very interesting because I never get the same answer, but it's one of my favorite questions to ask. What life event inspired you to want to become a writer?
I had no ambitions to be a writer. If you went back 10 years and said, look, you're going to be a writer, I would look at that person and go, no, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant and pump faces up with Restylane. That would be my answer. Um, I met a patient who was going through long IV treatments for Lyme disease. He didn't want to do it anymore. And so I just said, tell me something interesting about yourself. And he said, I was recruited by the CIA straight out of college. And that sparked a conversation. And we went through the whole, every conspiracy theory you could imagine about Lyme disease and this and that. And out of it came this story that the Fae started Lyme disease. That's not in my book, but that's what I made up. And then I told him that he was really there to find out if the hot nurse was a Fae human hybrid and he was a CIA agent. And I started making this story up. And I told it to him every time he came in. I would tell him like another chapter of it, just making it up. And finally he was like, you need to go home and write this down. This is good. And I was like, no, no, no. I'm in the CASPA, which is, the physician assistant like cycle to apply to schools. And I just was like, nope, that's what I'm going to do. I have no interest in this. The universe has a funny way of making you listen. And that's what it did with me. And a couple years later, here I am. And that portion of the story that I told him was what I originally started to write. And then it turned into volume one and volume two. And volume two, which is his story, comes out next year. So it's kind of funny the way things happen. But no, I never meant to do this. That wasn't on my bingo card.
Just out of curiosity, are you still friends with that guy?
Yep. He's one of my best friends to this day. He's read all the books. He keeps joking that he wants to know when he's going to make his literary debut. He wants, he's very interested in that right now. But yeah, he's been my biggest supporter.
Well, speaking of literary debuts, and no, I'm not asking this for my own personal gain. Uh, Contrary to what a lot of the people who I consulted about these questions seem to think, um, what advice would you give new and incoming writers to the genre and the industry?
Trust yourself. That's one of the biggest things. And I did not do that. That's why I tell people you need to trust yourself. I I listened to too many people because I didn't want to be difficult because I thought I'm getting such a great opportunity and I was so grateful for it that I listened too much. A lot of people are staunch in the fact that I'm an artist, it's my word. So they become difficult. I was the opposite. I was like, you must know best because I know nothing about this industry. So I'm going to trust you. And that was my mistake. There were times where I'm like, "Ooh, this doesn't seem right." But I went with them because I thought they were the experts. And I also went in a naive way thinking, if I sign a contract, they must have their, all our best interests at heart because if they make money, I make money. If I do well, they do well. No, the contract when you're with a publisher, yes, will always be skewed the other way. And I learned that the hard way. So trust yourself always.
Got you. And I could definitely call off more than a few people who I specifically told, hey, listen, I don't care how nice to you they are. They're not your friends. And even if they become your friends, it's not right now that they're your friends. Don't trust them, especially if they're directly making profit off you. They will lie to get themselves more, not you more.
Exactly. The thing with an author is you keep the lights on. You're paying their bills. And especially in writing and publishing, you're made to feel like, oh, there's a million of you. I can go and pick up somebody else tomorrow. And I think the authors become desperate. So they believe it and they want to just be amicable and amenable to everything. That's not how it goes. Publisher is always going to look out for themselves. Always. It's never going to be you. I don't care how wonderful they tell you, how great the book is. No, it's always their bottom line.
Yeah, that's what happened. I can't properly pronounce her name, but this Canadian Chinese girl, she made like 3 books that went extremely well over, and her publisher tried to lie to her during the pandemic and signed a contract that got her less money from her own works. And it was disgusting. The worst part is, though, it's one of the biggest publishers for like young
Oh,
adult
yeah.
books in the world, not the country, the world. And they just said, nah, let's go and shaft you. I was like, wow, that was disgusting.
Oh, yeah. There's a reason why I am now self-publishing and I will never go back. I don't care who it is that knocks on my door. No, I will publish myself. Thank you very much.
I would say at best, you're better off. I mean, if you really want to go that route, which more power to you, I would say as someone who technically would become a client, never a superior, I would say that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you get good distribution contracts. That one is a little.
Oh, yes, I do. Because I have a track record, I have never had a problem. I don't have a problem with distribution. It's just funny that my books have hit number one since I've taken over. Before, no, when I was getting quote unquote all the help. Now I am.
It's almost as if you write well, it doesn't matter how an editor feels.
Uh,
Say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that's interesting. That's another thing is my old publisher, authors edited other authors. I always paid for my own publisher. I always paid for my own publisher out of pocket. Then it would go to my publisher, and then when I signed, they never told me this. Other authors were editing. So my book would come in completely clean, ready to go to press. Another author would get a handle on it, and literally all my work would be redone. And conflict of interest, big time. So if you are going to be published by someone else, you need to know the editing process, the proofing process, development, all of that. It needs to be laid out. So there's a lot of tricks to the trade. And that's part of the reason why I stick with what I stick with. I have great distribution, but now I'm in control 100% that it's my word, my work, editing, everything.
And that's kind of how my little business was even born because, well, it's one thing when you're the person backstabbing everybody, but it's another when you get used to backstab people and you don't even know about it. Then,
Mhm.
just talking to the right people and being realizing, hey man, I don't like this idea because I feel like I'm being hired to manipulate and backstab innocent artists, which is
Yes.
completely unnecessary. And then, a few months later, a good 6, 7 years ago, here I am essentially doing media adaptation when and where I can. And I also specifically tell people I am not going to, nor am I trying to take any of your publishing rights or anything like that. In fact, I don't need your rights. I just need commission.
Right. That's it. That's that's the fair exchange, the equitable exchange.
Yeah. Because, me doing it one time, okay, I understand. Me doing it one time, and I do mean one time, is not going to result in me having a sustainable career, let alone job. So I basically tell them, look, here's a flat fee. What the artist and the actors charge is what they charge. If you don't want to pay it, that's fine. I can get thousands of others based on what you want. But as long as
Mhm.
I get my between 2 to 4% residuals, I am happy as can be. Just because,
Mhm.
well, you doing that means you still get to own your stuff, and I still can have a functional career. Because if somebody wants to put in a 7 figure order for me, and then I don't get work for 6 years, that's not really all that healthy. But if someone puts
Mhm.
in a $12,000 or less order, and then there's 50 more guys behind them, plus 2 to 4% residuals, that's a career. That's how you build a network.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I'm about transparency.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to I mean, the internet does need to know their names, but hey, if you ever want to talk to them, you can. Besides Matthew Lesko, the legend for getting people government grants and loans for basically no money. I just happen to be lucky that I have two cousins that I've known since I knew myself. I was just at his Thanksgiving, literally on Thanksgiving, twice now, because of just him being my cousin and being comfortable with just helping me without me having to pay to go see his office and whatnot, or consultations. I've been able to do what I'm doing and be able to help the way I've been able to help. Because when you go in a room with rich people and you tell them, hey, listen, I want to do things fair and square, they're not going to laugh
Mhm.
you out of the room. They're going to
Right.
slowly spend time trying to manipulate you into cheating everyone.
Mhm. Yeah.
I could always, but you're the star of the show today, not me.
Oh no, I completely this is what happened to me. My first book, the publisher was a friend of my best friend. I was cheated out of almost all my money, all of it. I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, and uh things went completely wrong. I was given the chance to leave because they were pivoting their model, and instead of going with my heart, I actually gave it to lawyers and said, "What do I do?" And they were the ones who were like, "Get out now." And I did. And I sat back, and it was messy. Even though I was given the opportunity to leave, it still became messy. Um, and that's when I said, I'm not getting married again with my books. My books are my work. It's my baby. I gave up PA school and everything. I was accepted into a program, ready to go to do this. If I'm going to do it, let's do it right. And while I had been with both publishers, I was starting to get notice from movie studios were starting to go, there might be something here. But because both books were not published the way I wanted them, and my words were being twisted, editing was not clean, things like that were happening without my knowledge. Um, i- it's it's very weird when you submit a book and you think it's one way, it's published another, and Chris Claremont is sitting in front of you, the godfather of the X-Men, going, "Honey, I love you, but you understand on page one of the hardcover that is spelt wrong." And then you go back to your manuscript that you submitted and it's spelt perfectly fine. And you're going, "Oh my God, they published my first draft because they uploaded something wrong." And you're pulling your hair out.
This is the shit that was the main reason I still try to help people like you, not just necessarily with alternate forms of adaptation, but with just better networking or just understanding. Hey, listen, if they're making more money than you, there will always be a chance to backstab you. If their job is
Yes.
attention, they will always have a chance of backstabbing you. Like, I mean, well, I'm not gonna say her name, but the project that I'm working on that like has just my name on it,
Mhm.
just my name on it. Yeah, I know. I saw your message. Um, that project in particular, I actually got one of the professors at University of Illinois in Chicago from. Someone who not only has a bachelor's but an associate's and is going for their professorial degree, and they're like one semester away from graduating. And I accidentally made the rookie mistake of introducing her to someone who I thought I could trust.
I've unfortunately, yeah, been there, and I'm sorry that that happened. I have been there. There's a lot of stories like that.
Her loss is potentially going to be your 6 to 7 figure gain if I have my way.
Yeah, that's exactly. I had it happen. I was on the Tamron Hall show. It'll be 2 years, I think, this March. As a indie author to watch, they actually took pictures from one of my cover shoots for my book, and I was cosplayed out and the whole thing. The publisher changed the covers and took me off the covers a month later.
They don't want you to get movie or media adaptation notoriety unless they.
They didn't want me to succeed at all. Every marketing person said, "This is suicide. Do not do this." They said the whole thing is, is a big deal. Like, they showed her at the photo shoot. They're calling her, this, and that. They were like, "Don't do this." They changed all the covers. They were unrecognizable, took me off of them, and no one could understand why.
Fix so many things.
It was really bad. I was very upset. I told them I had wanted tarot cards and, graphic novel, whatever. They kept saying they would do it. Never did it. And when I mean 2 months of leaving them, I found Akira, who's a fabulous comic book editor, and Mike Lilly signed on within a week. And all I did was reach out to him. And I don't, if you're not a comic book person, maybe you don't know him, but he's done Nightwing, he's done some Wolverine, phenomenal
He was at
work.
C2E2.
Yes, he's at C2E2. He's been at San Diego, everything. And all I did was say, "I love your stuff. Here's the gist of it." And he was like, "When do we start?" It was that, I mean, and I was like, "Oh, really?" Because I did not expect him to say yes.
This is the power of people who like a good revenge story. I cannot wait to see how many birds you flip on the first day that whatever you do premieres in any type of theater. I swear.
Oh, I'll be doing it all day. Believe me, I'm all day long.
You had, well, I don't know how Instagram does it. Like, I should not know you. Don't get me wrong. I specifically target people like you, not because I want to manipulate you or mold you. Quite the opposite. Um, but I legitimately just saw, oh, this is really bright hair. I clicked the whole reel about you just going through your condition, and I just went through the whole thing. And I believe I hit you up on Instagram almost 3 or 4 months before you somehow found me. And
Yeah.
then I was like, well, that missed opportunity, but I'm still rooting for her. And then all of a sudden, I just go through Pod Match. Here's the ironic part, because they accidentally tried to match me up with a religious zealot. You best believe I fucking raised some hell. So I'm like, you know what? Let me
Okay.
go through my Pod Match feed, and then literally the next day, boom, you.
Perfect timing. Like I said, the universe works in very mysterious ways. I always say it's not about or it's not about mysterious ways, it's about timing. That's when it does it. And in my case, the universe throws a pebble at me but it winds up going to the boulder quick. It's a pebble, it's a rock, it's a brick, and then finally it's a wily e. coyote boulder that lands on me before I'm like, "Oh, I'm supposed to go do this. Got it." That's usually what it takes before I realize, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed. Okay, got it." Because I tend to be like, "No, this is my plan." And the universe always looks at me and goes, "Oh, you still think you're in charge? That's adorable. That's so cute. Have you not learned your lesson yet, sweetie pie?" And I'm
Used to be
like,
my favorite thing to say
"Okay."
to publishers when they would come at me for what I was doing.
Yep.
Like word for word. Oh, you
Mhm.
think you're in charge? That's adorable.
Yes.
Well, we're gonna
Yeah.
have to send some lawyers down. Okay. Well, see, here's the thing about your lawyers. You have to get one from the state that you want to sue somebody who's in, right? And also, this is not a felony act. Also, you would need to sue me for something I'm not legally allowed to do. Now, based on me having three different lawyers, I always have look over anything relating to legal
Mhm.
matters with people like you. I haven't done anything. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is a threat that is completely unwarranted and unfounded. And also, technically, I could take legal recourse. Yes, you have more money than me, but really stop think about it. Do you want to be the big bad $1 billion,
Yes.
$100 million publisher
Mhm.
who's trying to harass somebody for working with someone who you work with who okayed this because you didn't think to make this an avenue or venue for media adaptation? Oh, and then I do my favorite thing ever. I give them the address listed on my state ID, which I don't live at, and I tell them, tell
Mhm.
you what, I usually say it in French, but my audience is primarily English, and I tell them essentially, come get me. So when I tell them come get me and hang up the phone, I will get a series of emails. I immediately revert to spam because I realize very quickly, wait a minute, your contract was, I did in fact interpret your contract correctly. And even if I didn't, they would have to state that they gave you a copy of any altered contracts. So since it
Mhm.
completely left out the concept of audio related to author narrated audiobooks, because that was their hook for authors. Hey, we'll let you narrate your
Yes.
own audiobook and we'll pay you to do it. It didn't state that they couldn't do anything else. It didn't state that they were locked into that shit. Nothing like that
Mhm.
whatsoever. And then one time everything went perfectly fine, but the author decided they wanted to use SAG ACTRA actors. Not that there's anything
Mhm.
wrong with non-union actors, but they just wanted to use SAG
Right.
ACTRA actors. And most people, unfortunately, they don't know this, and I'm telling you now so you can prepare yourself how you feel. SAG ACTRA actors multiply the cost of development. Not because
Yes.
they're all rich and bastards who want nothing but money and they're grubby. Some are like that, let's not lie. But it's
Mhm.
because the way SAG ACTRA contract works, if one actor from SAG ACTRA is on a project, even if 50 others are non union, everyone has to be updated to the minimum standard for that state for SAG ACTRA. So if your
Mhm.
entire crew, let's say I get you 40 voice actors, and all of them are
Mhm.
doing 80 an hour, but the SAG ACTRA minimum in Illinois for voice acting is 125, well, everybody just got a pay bump. So multiply that
Yes.
difference so your production costs can fucking skyrocket. But that's why I tell people, you don't have to fight the union, but you need to decide early on if you do or do not care. Because if you don't care, yes,
Mhm.
there's bigger stuff. But also, you could hate everyone who's in the non-union, and you could own, and all the voices you like for your project are the ones who are in the union, and we can go that route. And a lot of
Mhm.
people will be doing some layered voices unless you really gonna get a loan or a grant or some shit. And I like having that openness. But then when these publishers come in, they've
Oh,
my clients.
yeah.
If I'm counting right now, I'm almost in the double digits. They've tricked my clients into believing they signed away their rights to do something, or that they can't do
Yes.
something because the publisher told them, "Oh no, we can't do this. This will cost millions of dollars. We'd have to build a studio." Why the fuck would you have to build a studio?
I I went through something very similar with my second publisher, and after, because I had put out my first audiobook and I paid for it myself. And I wanted to continue with the same people because I just loved them. And uh my publisher screwed that up and tried to tell me that they didn't no longer wanted to work with me. Basically, they just didn't want to pay them. And they wanted to pay another author to do my book. And she tried and screwed up all the pronunciation so badly that I had a Native American group come after me because she mispronounced my. I have a female guard group called the Illuminasca. She pronounced them the Illuminasqua, and this was a problem for a lot of different reasons. But when I left them, I went back to Skyboat, who did the rest of them, and they're fabulous. but these guys tried everything.
Yeah, and that's the main thing too, because I hate it because, well, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's SAG after, sometimes it's the publisher, sometimes it's both, but they're very familiar with a very simple concept. What your budget is not what SAG after will actually care about. They'll look at the company
Right.
behind you and assume because you're from $1 billion company or $100 million company, your budget must actually be 6 7 figures, and then play the bullshit
Mhm.
game because they bracket off how you're supposed to pay people. So if it's a $2 million production, you're not giving them the minimum of 120 an hour. They're supposed to be getting something like 4 or 500. But if it's a $10,000 production, they're supposed to be getting that minimum 120 an hour. And the main thing is
Right.
that they're not doing it based off what you tell them the budget is. Sometimes they'll just bullshit and say, nope, you're being funded by $1 billion company. It's like, no, sometimes the author want to pay their damn self because they can get more money that way, or the book company literally don't actually fuck with audio drama licensing and rights and adaptations because they themselves do not want to pay to have an entire department dedicated to it. But instead of contracting it out to a third party who would be interested, like myself, they just say, nah, we'll just make sure nobody can get access to it, which is fucking
I
bullshit.
remember my publisher did wanna see my pilot because I was placing in Screencraft's, pilot script contest,
Yeah, I heard about it.
and I was just like, "No, I'm not." I never divulged to anyone because I was like, "No." I felt like once they saw it, somehow they had ownership, so I kept that very quiet,
Smart decision.
and I was like,
If they will try to find ways to make it feel like they do.
"Yeah," and I just kept saying, "Yeah, no, I'll send it, yeah, yeah," and I would just delay, 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 and so after I left, I then pulled it from every contest, and I still never re-entered it because it was one of those things that I felt very protective of, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to sit on it. I just felt like I had to go into hiding for a little bit and reevaluate, and that was one thing that I just kind of put in my back pocket and put it aside because I was asked, "Oh, you want to do live action?" And I was like, "No, I want to do anime." That was my whole thing with the book was I always wanted to do anime, and I got approached for live action and things like that. But I said, "No, it's gonna be anime." I said, "I want a dark Castlevania style powerhouse kind of anime look," and that's what I knew I wanted, but I kept it to myself because I didn't want too many hands in the cookie jar, so to speak, and I didn't want too many other ideas. You know how sometimes everybody comes after you and they're like, "Oh, but you should do this, and this one's really good." And I'm like, "This is the one I want, and this is the one goal I kinda have to nurture and put it on the shelf and just leave it. And when I'm ready, I'll know." And that was it. And when I talked about doing, I think it was Shannon Mayer who started doing dramatic readings of her books. And I went to somebody and I said, I want to do a podcast and release one chapter, like each month, each week, something like that of Locked Out of Heaven. And everybody told me I was crazy. And I said, I want to script it out and get these voice actors and do something really cool. And everybody said, "No, that's ridiculous. That's like an old radio show." And now I'm like, everybody's doing it. Demi Moore's doing one. Yeah, and they were all like, "No, that's dumb. That's dumb." And I was like, "Oh," and that's another one where I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, I guess it's silly." Because I thought to me, that's how you kind of start getting into the animation thing is let people start to visualize instead of just an audiobook, which like I said, I love my audiobooks, but that was my vision. And sometimes you listen to people because you think they're in the industry, they know. But sometimes there's something in a gut that's like, no, go with this. This is a good idea. And I back down. And those are some of the ideas I had that I just put on shelves and went, when you're away from all of this, then revisit this. There's something here, but you might just have to wait.
And
And
then you
that's
waited and found me.
and then I found you. Yep. And it's very funny because I saw
I don't
Jim.
know if you've seen it, or rather, most
Mhm.
people don't know about it. But not only is your idea proven to be successful, I can give you a recommendation. I believe it stayed in the top 10 for like 2 weeks on Netflix. Ever heard of Nimona?
Yes.
Nimona.
Hmm. Yes.
It was a comic book with some of the most, for lack of a better term, grade school adjacent art style. Then it became its own audio drama, which most people don't even know it exists. And now
Mhm.
and then it's got a movie on Netflix. Mind you, it's meant to be a one of, so it doesn't go through the full story, and the story is a little bit different. But guess what?
Yeah.
Your entire methodology is proven to work. So yeah, that's already one way to flip somebody the bird and throw pneumonia in their face.
Yeah. I was at New York Comic Con this year and I saw I'm friends with Jim Steranko. And I became friends with him because he saw me dressed as Harley Quinn and we had a discussion years ago. And he took Locked Out of Heaven and then he took Thine Eyes of Mercy. And he was the one who was like, "You're gonna do a graphic novel, right?" And I said, "That was my original idea for the book. I didn't want it to be, I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to do a graphic novel." And I said, "But I abandoned it." And he was like, "No, no, sweetie, go back." And he held the book and then he like slammed it in his hand, like he beat it in his hand a couple times. He's like, "This is a graphic novel. Go do that." He's like, "You need to trust yourself." And I was like, "All right." Like Stranko's saying it. Maybe I got to listen to him.
Yeah, I mean he is considered a smart motherfucker. Um, Okay, well, let's wrap this up before we get into, I guess, more of the fun stuff. So, with that being said, let me just ask you one thing. So, we all know that when novels of any kind get adapted, it's very common for elements and entire storylines to potentially be cut, or characters inexplicably changed into someone else. In your opinion, do you think it is better for authors to obligate their stories, not the excessively tampered with, not be excessively tampered with, or should they come to accept that things will be removed or cut when media adaptations change, formats?
You you have to look at it like a comic book. That's, exposition's going to get cut. It's just how it's going to be. Visual and writing, it's different. I think about how many panels a comic book has and everything they have to convey. If you take your page of writing or whatever it is and think about, if I put it in a comic book, what are the essential pieces? That gives you an idea about the adaptation. They don't need to walk in the forest for pages and pages where you're describing all the trees. That's going to go. And you have to kind of just deal with it and not get so attached.
That that's beautiful. That answer usually trips people up, but you kind of had something in the bank. I like that. Now I've heard people say different things, but to be fair, I know that question is a to each his own, which is kind of why it's there. Because if I want an echo chamber, I would just go yell in an echo chamber. Um,
Mhm.
well, I definitely appreciate that. With that being said, before we get out of here, can you
Mhm.
please tell the audience the multiple places you would like them to go and find you?
You can always find me. The best place is on Instagram at DM Orsino author. I believe that's the same as my Facebook. I'm going to be very honest. I don't go on Facebook a lot, but it's just one of those things. I have the page, but I'm not 100% sure. But Instagram's the best place, DM Orsino author. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Danielle M Orisino author, and that's where Once Upon an Author is after it airs on WWDB 860 AM on Tuesdays, and then they play it constantly on their Facebook because it's live streamed. And then Liberty Bell Smack is a pop culture sports show on WWDB 860 AM on Thursday nights at 6 p.m. And you can find me there as well with my co host, Marianne Costello, who is actually one of the singers for the legendary rock band Nectar. And her and I discuss everything there.
Fantastic. With that being said, thank you for coming on the show. We will definitely be having you again.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing from you as many times as you put out something. With that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.